South Korea. Inclusive education in South Korea intends that children with special needs attend kindergarten or child care center with typically developing peers. So it means that it opens an equal opportunity for the education of every Korean with disabilities or none. Then it leads to the increase of general education institutes. So let's have a short background on how South Korea attained inclusive education or special education for the children with disabilities, and what are the organizations or movements reinforce this education, which is the inclusive education. 1970s, the special education for children with disabilities in Korea was provided through the charitable support of individuals. So these were mainly managed by the private schools, which were established by the philanthropies. So this means that the buildings or the institutions that was built for the inclusive education for the disabilities in South Korea were not have the support from a government. So literally, it came from the people who have the heart or who are concerned to the education of the children with disabilities. Special Education Promotion Act were drawn up 10 years by professors at Daegu University, where Tae Young Lee is the first president at Daegu University, and Yoon Sik Ri, who established the Daegu Schools for the Blind as the first school for the disabled pupils in South Korea. The second half of 1970s, the government of South Korea was under the dictatorship government. So the freedom of expression was restricted and limited. So that's why the organization of every educational rights of the disabled person with disabilities were not be able to express themselves about their concern or to have a rally of protest. So it means that because of this, inclusive education for the educational rights of the children with disabilities are not directly or hindi agad nabigyang pansin or atensyon. The dictatorship government of South Korea ended because of an event. In order to host the 1988 Seoul Olympic Games, the Korean government had to improve the welfare and human rights situation in Korea, because in 1981 was the United Nations International Year of Disabled Persons, and 1992 to 2001 was the Asian Pacific Decade of Disabled Person. So, yung dalawang event na to ang nagtulak then to improve the welfare and human rights sa mga tao or sa mga citizens in Korea. Kasi siguro din to avoid conflict and issues na yung ibang nations or ibang countries is binibigyan nila ng support yung disabled person, wherein sa South Korea hindi nila binibigyang pansin or atensyon. Then siguro din yung Seoul Olympic Games din may standard din in order for the country to host it. Dahil sa pangyayaring ito, it paved a way to have a pro-democratic resistance movement in 1987 where they are fighting for democracy. Eventually, a 30 years of military dictatorship ended. So, isa sa bumuo o sumuporta sa movement na pro-democratic resistance movement in 1987 is the Disabled Persons Organizations. At marami pang nagsulputang movement kung saan sinusuportahan nila yung special education for children with disabilities. Aside of SEPA, In 1991, the Joint Countermeasure Committee for the Welfare of Disabled Persons set up to persuade local residents opposed to the building of the night school for students with intellectual disabilities, and this to find support from the society for the fundamental educational measures for disabled students. Basically, this committee will assess the needs of parents with disabled children and its disabled children itself and its environment. After assessment, the committee ended up to promote the Framework of Education for Disabled Students Act, or FEDSA. Experts in special education and the JCCWDP both believed that there was a need for legal and institutional educational provisions for disabled students. The Korean Special Education Association, or KSEA, suggested amending some aspects of SEPA without changing the law, but it was opposed by JCCWDP, where they want to abrogate the SEPA and enact FEDSA instead. But KSEA was chosen by the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology. In 2007, the Special Education for Disabled Persons Act, or ASEDP, became law. It reflecting the needs and demands of disabled people has enabled the movement for independent living for severely disabled people. In order to enact the ASEDP, the organization was able to forcefully articulating their oppressed status and using tactics that included violent protests like hunger strike, occupying buildings or shaving hair, and etc. Therefore, the movement or an organizations help a lot to promote the human rights for the disabled people, specifically in education. The goals of inclusive education in South Korea. It is a support system of special education and a part that focuses on education without discrimination. All children can get the same education. Children with special needs are no exception and be an opportunity for students with or without disabilities to understand and learn together. Korean educational climate making it harder for inclusive education. Most Korean educational institutes tend to be a seriously competitive environment only for the pursuit of learning achievement. For instance, extracurricular activities in private kindergartens have been extended very widely. It has resulted in many children, even less than 3 years old, already having been put under the pressure of academic achievement and rushed to be mature too early. Thus, they become more dependent, selfish, stressed, and competitive. These educational climates have made children who are not able to accept diversity and independent challenges and to consider others who especially are behind them.